All right, is everybody ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Okay, great.
All right, awesome. Big crowd. So we're going to talk about work harder, not smarter. Work smarter, not harder. Utilizing the SMART framework to establish on-shift goals. So my name's Allie Bowler. I'm one of the APDs at Utah.
And I'm Rowan Kellner. I'm a med ed fellow at Utah.
Perfect. So we have no disclosures. So we're going to go through a couple of things today. So by the end of the session, we really want you all to be able to utilize SMART goals to improve on-shift teaching and patient care, to develop SMART goals with your learners at the start of each shift, to be able to refocus learners on shift goals to follow this framework by asking clarifying questions, and lastly, to evaluate learner SMART goals for timely on-shift and post-shift feedback. So kind of like any shift, you're really excited and you get to shift and you ask your learners, what do you want to work on today? And do they have any goals for the shift? And most of our first and second years, they're really enthusiastic and they're just like, I really want to see critical patients. And you're like, yeah, me too. But is that really a goal? Can I measure that goal? Can I give feedback on that goal? What does that look like? Can we be more specific? And so that's really where kind of the importance of establishing goals come in, and then we'll talk a little bit about using SMART goals. So goals on shift are really great, and they allow us to do a lot of important things. And the biggest thing is it allows our learners to be self-directed. And so I've been doing this now for 2 years at the U, and when I have residents come on shift, they know that they're working with me and that they have to come with a goal. And this is really positive for a few things. It means that they're thinking ahead, they're thinking about their own growth, and they're coming ready to have a shift with their own directed learning goals. In addition, it improves learner engagement and instructor evals. I think a lot of times our learners don't always understand when they're being taught, and this gives you a very formal method of showing your learners that you're engaged, and ultimately that will lead to better evaluations. You can have tailored assessment and feedback, so it gives you something to actively assess and give feedback on throughout the shift. And then surprisingly, establishing goals for your residents and students has been shown to increase and enhance patient education, relationships, and outcomes. So what are SMART goals? You've probably used them before to create long-term, short-term goals, and they are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And the difference here in how we're applying it to on-shift goals is that we want the resident to create a goal and then the attending to create a buy-in goal to help them achieve their SMART goal on the shift. So for time-bound, we really want this to be a one-shift goal unless you're working with that resident more than once. I think it's really important to do something that they can actually attain on shift. And so we're going to go through a couple examples and then do a short breakout activity and then kind of finish up the session. So just a quick example, when we have that resident who says, I'm really excited, I want to see more critical patients. Well, it's time to probe a little bit. What do they mean by wanting to see more critical patients? What are they worried about? What do they need to work on? And so oftentimes there's an element of running a code, or maybe it's medical knowledge, maybe it's the leadership or communication with a team that they want to work on. So you really want to probe your resident or your student and see what is it exactly, what is the skill that they need to work on. And so you talk with your resident, and it turns out that communication has been a big issue, and that's something that they want to work on. So instead of seeing more critical patients, you can help your resident focus the goal and say, I really want to use closed loop communication during critical resuscitations and address staff by name. And so for the attending, you have to think about, well, how am I going to help with that? How am I going to measure that? And so you can say, well, the attending will observe the resident during resuscitations, and that's a little bit passive, and we want you to be active and engaged in their learning. And so we can change it and say, they're going to assess the critical actions. Is the resident using closed loop communication? And then we want the attending to debrief immediately after the resuscitation to review the progress. Is this attainable? I think this can happen on shift. Is it realistic? Yes. And is it time bound? You can just edit it a little bit to make sure it's by the end of shift.
So another common example I'm sure we've all come across is I want to work on my differential, which is great. Differentials are important, but it's not very specific. It doesn't really mean anything. So instead we can make that more specific and say, okay, I want you to make a differential diagnosis utilizing the SPIT model for each patient encounter. I want you to come up with some probable or interesting or threatening diagnoses for each different possibility from the chief complaint. measurable. The attending will agree if the differential's good. Yeah, that's nice. Sometimes you say, yeah, great differential and get on with your day. But better is you can review that model with them each time, and you can kind of have something to go over if they didn't come up with what was most probable, or if they didn't come up with what was most dangerous. And this is very attainable, it's very realistic, and of course it is time bound. Okay, so now is the breakout part of it. We want you to choose one or two of these common goals that could be improved and work and improve those together using the SMART model.
So yeah, take a few minutes to think about one of these that you would work with the resident, how you would work with the resident. And then you will partner up with sharing. Feel free to ask questions. I mean, this is a small group, so
I need remediation.
yes. You need
We're
remediation.
supposed to report, like, one of us is writing the student goal, one of us is writing the technical, or I do this all myself.
So I think first, think about one that you would do, and then share with your partner what you thought of, and then we'll ask you guys to kind of talk to us about what you thought, if you feel comfortable sharing. Okay.
All right, does anyone want to share some of the SMART goals they created? And I can call people out who I know if they don't want to volunteer.
Julia?
We worked on, well, both Sophia and I worked on the get my notes done on time goal.
Yeah.
So something that we thought may be kind of smarter or more feasible was to set something more along the lines of to start the note at least to the MDM at each time you sit down at your computer and try to catch up, which is something that we've tried to isolate.
Perfect. And as a future educator, how would you help your resident with that goal?
Yeah, it's like harder, I think, on the other side because the accountability is not on you, but something we talked about was like having like whatever, 3 designated check-in times where you might say, hey, have you started your notes on the patients that we've seen so far, or how can I help you kind of catch up to down to your MDM of those patients so far?
Perfect.
Yeah. Anyone else?
So why did the note thing too? You want a different one?
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So the note thing I was actually saying is complete all the notes through the differential immediately after seeing the patient.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Then put in the orders of secretary, and then finish each note immediately after the dispose to sign. And the attending should be able to check in each time they present a patient, like, have you done the note? Up to, and then after they dispose, have you done the note?
So the note is done before the presentation?
Note is done.
Right after?
After, I guess after.
Yeah.
I guess it is.
Oh, that's great.
Cool. Maybe in the back? Do you guys feel comfortable sharing? If not, that's okay.
We had a hard time, like, figuring out how to measure it.
Yeah, it is hard how to measure. I mean, it doesn't have to be so specifically measurable, but by that it just means something that you can actually quantify in some way. Are they doing a good job?
We just said balance your time for the show.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And so as an attending, I would say, what does that mean? What does it mean to balance your time? What do you have to do to get your notes done on time? Do you have to give yourself a few minutes before you see the next patient to sit down and get your notes? So I would really get into the weeds of like, how do we really get better? What is your goal and how do we tackle that together? So I think we want to like stay away from the big broad goals and keep asking clarifying questions until we get to the nitty gritty of something you can really accomplish on the shift and things that you can feasibly check in with your resident on.
I think that was easily measured.
Yeah.
Or they leave in 30 minutes after.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Awesome.
So let's just talk about one of the more difficult situations, which is, I don't have any goals. And that's fine. I think especially as our learners get into the later second year, third year, beyond, they're starting to feel pretty independent, like they might not have something they can work on. I think it's a good time to talk and to your learner about some self-reflection, just more probing questions. What did you struggle with last shift? What are you having difficulty? What's bothering you? What are you thinking about at home? You can have your own script goals, for your third years and second years and first years. You might say, for third years, you're about to go out on your own. My goal for you is to really, decide on these dispos yourself and everything, and I'm just gonna check you right at the end. I want you to make all the decisions today and really hold them to that. Sometimes with our off-service learners, that can be really difficult too, because they don't have the same goals we do, but there's always something for everyone in the emergency department. I mean, we span the breadth of medicine, so as long as you can kind of know what they want, you can help them with their goals. Finally, if you really have to get someone in trouble, you can go down into ACGME milestones or the KSAs for ideas. So these are truly the things that we're supposed to be teaching our residents and that they're supposed to be meeting, and so you can find something in there that will be helpful. And I think one thing that's really nice about having a goal is that it makes the feedback so much better. You know, when you don't have a goal and you've just had a shift that's flown by and has gone mostly fine, yeah, I think sometimes the feedback is just, yeah, you did a good job, because you weren't really looking at anything. You didn't have anything to focus on. You know, a concrete goal directs your feedback and makes it more actionable. It flows sort of from the discussion you had at your shift. They're expecting that you guys were working on a goal, and so it makes sense to talk about it at the end and have a short, focused discussion on that. And then you can have that continuous feedback because you know what you're working on, you know the goal, and you can see the behaviors that are going on over the course of the shift and correct and work on them together. Okay, so in terms of take-home points, ask clarifying questions that allow the learner to think critically about themselves, about their personal development. Have some goal scripts and goals that you know that most residents need to work on, you can slot people into when they're not really feeling like self-reflection. Create that environment where you can develop the learners together, the goals together with your learner. They know that you're invested in them. And finally, yeah, create a natural transition at the end to discuss feedback with them and ask, you know, did they achieve their goal? Why or why not? And I think you're going to have a lot more productive growth with your residents. Thank you guys so much.